Hi guys, this is Mr. Vinegar. We're going to be going over what you're going to need to know for your SCA as far as branches of government, things along those lines, as far as checks and balances, and some of those key terms that you're going to need to know. Of course, we're going to be spending more time than this, but for the sake of time, we're going to have to try to get your SCA in this week. So whether it be if you're Group A, it'd probably be Tuesday. If you're Group B, it's probably going to be Friday. And so this video is meant to help. If I confuse you in any way, please let me know. Please shoot me an email. We'll be cahooting, things like that as well. This is just another tool in the toolbox to help you. So without further ado, let's get started. Remember, our system is an executive, legislative, judicial. You will need to know all three in detail, but our system is broke up this way to ensure that no branch becomes too powerful. And so our founders believed in the idea that Montesquieu came up with the separation of powers, as being a good way to make sure that we limit the possibility of government corruption. So if you notice, legislative is at the top, executive and judicial are at the bottom. That's not on accident. Our founders intended the legislative branch to be the strongest of the three, but definitely all have limitations, things they can do, things they can't do. So if you look, we're going to need to know what those checks and balances are, what those things are. You're going to need to know those in detail. So for example, the executive branch can appoint a justice to the judicial branch, but really that's the only check the presidency has. But any appointments made by the executive branch, including those judges, so if you look here, any appointments, the legislative, specifically the Senate, can reject that if they choose to, if they have the votes to. So things along those lines. Of course, everybody gets caught up in the veto from the executive to the legislative. That's a popular one. There are also things, the big one here for the judicial branch is unconstitutionality between both of these. So they can declare both presidential action and a legislative law unconstitutional, and thus basically strike it from the record. So the judicial branch, while it doesn't have a lot of them, what they do have is very powerful. So something to keep in mind as we move forward, that there are these checks and balances. So please refer back to this. Make sure you're able to explain at least two from each branch. So quick review. Congress, you will need to know who the Speaker of the House is. That is Nancy Pelosi. Currently, it looks like Nancy Pelosi will be the Speaker again, pending the election process within Congress. Once the presidential election is decided, once these recounts are done, things like that, the House will have their own internal election to decide who the Speaker is. So we're going to say Nancy Pelosi for now, but as of January, that could change. Congress has specific powers listed in Article 1. It is by far the longest section in the Constitution for a reason. So they have powers specifically listed, which makes them, excuse me, delegated to them. They're not reserved. So you have the power to create law. That is the most important, probably, function of Congress. That's what you're going to need to be able to explain. Obviously, to create laws to make society better. And in order to do that, they have the power of the necessary and proper clause within the Constitution, also known as the elastic clause, which allows them to bend and stretch where they need to go. So, for example, if they need to investigate something, if we look at oversight investigations down here, one that comes to mind recently was Benghazi, or if they need to investigate, there's one currently listed as racial injustice, things like that. They can create a committee to do that. So anything that falls within their jurisdiction and that they need to create to do their job more efficiently, they have the power to do that. And they have the power to get rid of it and contract it. Think of it as like your Thanksgiving sweatpants. When you overstuff, they're able to expand, but then you can bring the elastic back in. So something along those lines. So also, they have the power to coin and regulate money. If you notice, the state of Ohio does not have its own currency. Okay, even though there's the cool Ohio quarter, that was a national national coin. So the power to coin and regulate money, yes, that includes taxation as well. It's called the power of the purse. All spending bills must also start in the House because that's the House directly connected to the people. Before the 17th Amendment, that was the people's check because ultimately senators were used to be chosen by your House representative member. Now, both houses are directly connected to the people, but the House is much more rapid still every 2 years. So something to consider for sure. The power of the purse, they can dictate where money is going to be spent and how, where your tax dollars go. Also, Congress has the power to declare war, but Mr. Benninger, doesn't Donald Trump or Joe Biden or somebody going to have that as the president? No. Now they can allow for military action, things like that. We'll get into that more in detail, but ultimately Congress is supposed to declare war. Last time that happened was 2001. Congress declared war on terrorism. Before that, it was World War II. So Korea and Vietnam, while we call them wars, technically were never declared by the United States. They were quote unquote police actions. Conflicts. So also you have the power of impeachment. If a justice or president or whoever is unable to do their job, they can't be removed from office. Congress has the power to approve presidential appointees and treaties. That includes Supreme Court justices, that includes cabinet members, that includes federal judges all the way down, as well as any treaty negotiated for another country. So an example of one that didn't work out so well was the League of Nations of World War I. Woodrow Wilson came up with the idea of the League of Nations. The United States was kind of the founder of it. Everybody else got on board, but Congress said no, and so the United States didn't join it. Some people argue that may have caused a cause of World War II. I'm not saying that's the case, but it's very interesting that that's a check that comes into mind. And then you have oversight and investigations into whatever needs to happen for Congress to do their job. So some House and Senate references that you're going to need to know. House of Representatives has 435 members by population. The Senate has 100 members. Terms of office, you're elected every 2 years and you have 2-year terms in the House. You have a third of the Senate elected over 2 years. 6 years is your term in the Senate. Senators intended for the House to be directly connected to the people and the Senate to kind of be the stabilizer. They used an example of a cup and saucer, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense in today's point of view, but basically, long story short, you used to pour your coffee out of the mug onto the soft saucer and drink it. And so the cooling saucer was the Senate, the piping hot coffee was the House. And so that was their intention was, yes, you heard me right, people used to drink off of plates. But the intent was Senate be the stabilizing House, the House of Representatives be the one that the people's voice can be heard immediately. As far as qualifications go, the House, you have to be at least 25 years of age to run for Congress. You have to be a citizen for at least 7 years, and you must live within the state where your district is located. Now, that being said, there is no, depends on the state how long you have to live there. Federal mandate, but there are state mandates there. As far as the Senate, you have to be at least 30 years old, be a citizen of that state for 9 years, and you must live somewhere in that state. Does that mean I can move to West Virginia and run for office in 9 years if I wanted to? Yes. Okay. Does it count if in either case, if I have a vacation home somewhere? That depends on the state. Certain states have different requirements for that. So, um, kind of interesting, but gives you an idea. So the constituencies, um, the House typically has around 900,000 members, where if you're the Senate, you have the entire state. So generally, this is not every single case because states like Wyoming aren't very big. Generally, your constituency is smaller if you're a House member. Your constituency is larger in the Senate. So what I mean by constituency is the people voting for you. So who do you need to please? So if you have the entire state versus a group within that state, there's going to be a difference. Now, smaller states, that can vary. So something to keep in mind. Prestige, generally it's considered more prestigious to be a Senate member than a House member. Neither one is, anything to sneeze at, but if you're like Speaker of the House, that's a big deal. But if you're a House Representatives member and you have a senator, people are going to, ooh, senator, a little more. So something to keep in mind. You will need to know some of these numbers, so make sure you study that. Okay. The executive branch, of course, is the presidency and anything that falls below, so cabinet members, as well as we'll get into bureaucracy in a minute. The main job of the executive branch is to enforce law. Your presidency is chosen by the Electoral College, not by the people. Now, your vote goes to vote for electors who then vote for president. You must have 270 electoral votes. Make sure you remember that number. In order to run for president, you must be at least 35 years old, be a naturalized citizen of the United States, see the 14th Amendment, okay? And you must have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. Now, how could you be a naturalized citizen? Well, like, for example, you could have dual citizenship or something like that, and then decide to come back and live in the United States. Or there's variances. You might have lived on a military base. Still counts. There's certain plots of land that technically are U.S. controlled, even though they're in another country. You're born there. Still counts. So there's some gray area there, but ultimately, what I mean by naturalized, if you're born in the United States, you can become president. If you weren't born in the United States or a territory or something controlled by the United States, you cannot. Which is why Arnold Schwarzenegger can never run for president. Anyway, constitutional powers given to the executive branch. The two main ones are foreign ambassador and commander-in-chief, meaning you're the one negotiating treaties, things like that with other countries, and you are in charge of the military. Our founders thought it was really important to have a civilian leader of the military. Of course, you can sign and veto legislation. I put that at the top because that's references to Congress immediately. State of the Union address, while not mandatory, you do have to convene during the convening and or adjournment of Congress. You need to send out an update of what you'd like to say. Those can be in writing. Does not have to be a speech. But traditionally, for a long time, it's been a speech. You also have the ability to grant pardons or reprieves, so you can grant somebody clemency, forgive them for their transgressions, and get rid of their punishment. You also have the ability to appoint justices, cabinet members, department heads, etc., with Senate approval. So as long as the Senate is on your side, you're okay. If the Senate's not on your side, it can get a little bumpy. Ask Donald Trump the first 2 years. Okay, the bureaucracy. This is departments within the executive branch, or generally, not always, but generally. And these are state-appointed officials rather than elected officials. So electors or people within government are appointing these positions. So the people have no direct connection to that. And so some people don't like this sort of stuff. But things like the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, Central Intelligence Agency, the FDA, USDA, things like that. All right. Generally, they're controlled by the executive branch, but they are independent of it. They do not have to listen to the presidency. They do not have to bow to his will. Okay, I asked Donald Trump about the CDC. The CDC and him have not exactly seen eye to eye on everything. Center for Disease Control. Okay, but these are appointed positions, so the people don't really have a say in them, and that's where they're a little contentious, for lack of a better term. So the president can issue executive orders as well under these departments to get something done. Now, we talked about that briefly in class. Of course, a bill is more permanent, but it takes a lot of steps to get through. We went over that. How many steps and how long it would take, and it's just not a good situation, right? So executive orders are a lot faster, but they're also a lot less permanent. The next president can come in and just wipe out everything you've done with a stroke of a pen. So something to think about. It's not permanent, but it can get a short-term thing done. For example, Barack Obama did that with the Dreamers, as they call it, the Dreamers, which is children born here that are technically undocumented immigrants. So yeah, gave them protections under an executive order, or national parks, things like that. Teddy Roosevelt issued national parks through the Department of Forestry, things like that, through executive action. All right, and then you have the judicial branch. Of course, we're going to be talking more about the Supreme Court right now. We'll get into the local levels later. These are 9 members, all right? Currently, this is not constitutional, though. This number can change. I know packing the court, for example, has become quite popular in the political sphere, but we'll talk about that another day. But right now, currently, it's 9. Those members serve for life. That is constitutional. So you have the power to overrule lower court decisions through the appeal process. If the court case keeps getting appealed and it gets to the Supreme Court, you could overturn it. And through their decisions, ironically, through a court case, they gain the power of judicial review, which is Marbury versus Madison. We'll spend some time specifically on that case, what that means. But what you need to know right now, Marbury versus Madison equals judicial review. So judicial review is the was what allows the courts to determine whether something is constitutional or not. So controversial court cases, for example, that come up, Plessy versus Ferguson allowed segregation to happen throughout society. Roe v. Wade, the abortion case. I don't think anybody's either side of that argument's really happy with that decision, but you have Obergefell versus Hodges, which allowed for gay marriage to be the law in all 50 states. So there are several. Texas versus Johnson, I believe is the flag burning case, that said flag burning was freedom of speech. So what these cases do ultimately, while they don't create law, is they give interpretation of the law. And that's what the judicial branch's job is. And I didn't type it on there, I should have. The judicial branch's job is to interpret the law, give meaning to it. So while Congress writes a law, well, what about in this case? What if think about the what ifs. The Supreme Court fills in the blank of what if. Okay? And so the judicial review power becomes quite a big deal as far as, for example, the Second Amendment. The language in the Second Amendment is not clear for a lot of people. You know, whether depends on if you focus on the militia part or the keep and bear arms shall not be infringed part. You know, some people believe, based on that language, that the Second Amendment is only for militias, so like the Ohio National Guard. Whereas everybody, you know, other people believe that the other side of that argument, any person can own a firearm to defend themselves. So there's an ongoing debate with that. I'm not going to get into that right now. But there is a few things that the courts can do. One is an amicus curiae brief. So you can have somebody come in who is not a party in the case to give their point of view. For example, pretty much every gun rights case that comes to the Supreme Court, the NRA tries to do this. Okay, a special interest group, the National Rifle Association. So they will give their point of view. Other groups can do the same. And so it can give context to justices to help them make a decision. Then there's the writ of certiorari. Okay, say that 10 times real fast. The Supreme Court can order a case to them from a lower court. If they see something that's going to be controversial, rather than going through the appeals process, they can just say, hey, we'll take it. So that's a power within their toolbox. And then you have habeas corpus, which is where a prisoner or detainee can be brought before the court to determine whether that detainment is lawful or not. Now, for example, let's say you have a terrorist or a potentially suspected terrorist, I should say. We are innocent until proven guilty, right? So a suspected terrorist has been held indefinitely without due process, and so you can call habeas corpus and decide whether or not that was legal or should have happened. Now, during times of war or civil unrest, this can be suspended. Most notably, Abe Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. So something to consider or think about. All right, so if you can know all this information, and of course we will Kahoot tomorrow if you want to, all right, tomorrow I should say, Monday and Thursday, if you want to study there. If you're a remote student, by the way, feel free to get with me and figure out what day you want to take your SCA. We'll figure that out. Or if you want to get with us and study, we can get you logged in. But if you can know this information, you will do well on the SCA. All right. So if you have any questions or anything, feel free to email me. Until then, I will see you later, everybody.